flunkies. And to give another example, the gentlelady gave the example of what happened in Ukraine. I want to give a closer home example of what happened with Hurricane Dorian when the scientists at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Weather Service, made predictions about where the hurricane was going to hit on the East Coast. And President Trump decided that the hurricane was really going to hit in Alabama. And that was just contradicted by the facts. And NOAA continued to put out notices to the public saying, no, that Alabama was not at serious risk for being a target, and it was going to be on the coast and much further south. And then Trump got very mad about that, and he got the Secretary of Commerce to go after them and so on. And this is really what we're talking about. Do you want the federal government filled with a bunch of political flunkies, hacks, and sycophants who will say whatever the president wants, or do you want professional scientists and civil servants who are going to follow facts and follow the law? The president's job is to take care that the law is faithfully executed, not that the law is disrupted and remade in his own royal image. And so if you want a government that is going to be letting Donald Trump and his SHARPIE determine where the hurricane's going to hit, as opposed to scientists, then you would be for Schedule F. But we view Schedule F as a serious danger to the professional civil service that's been built up over the last several decades.
There were some questions posed to you specifically about debt. And there seemed to be a concern about the mounting debt. And I am going out on a limb, and I am going to ask you if you are aware of how much debt we added under the Trump administration, out of curiosity. If you don't know, I know off the top of my head, but something tells me you may know.
I have an imprecise number. I bet you have the precise number in front of you, so I don't want to give you the imprecise number if you have the precise.
No. Give me the imprecise.
No, please.
Well, I'm going off of my head, because that wasn't part of what I was supposed to say. But long story short, $8 trillion was added under the Trump administration. And so I think that it is important that we focus on making sure that we're keeping our debt under control, but I think it's also important that we're honest about how that debt is accrued and make sure that we don't continue to make the same mistakes. I know that the election was brought up, and there are those that are standing by their man, but they also seem to be concerned about debt, which seems like the two don't go together, because we know that their man actually is really good at running up the credit card debt for this country, because he likes to give tax breaks to his very rich friends, which means that we don't get as much money coming through the door when they are not required to pay their fair share. So I just wanted to make sure that we put that out there first and foremost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And on behalf of the minority, Mr. Sessions, we want to send you our sympathy and our love on the untimely loss of Mr. Burnett. And I never had the opportunity to meet him, but he sounds like just an extraordinary and wonderful man. And we know you've lost not just your district chief, but a close friend, and so our hearts are with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Director Miller, for appearing today. OMB sets the policies that guide executive branch agencies on how to spend the money that Congress appropriates. It's OMB that turns administration policy priorities into the direct service of our constituents and our communities. So what we're talking about today is the essential mechanics of how the federal government works and how it should work, how to ensure that government services reach all eligible recipients, how to prevent and detect and reduce improper access to federal programs, and how to recruit and maintain the safety of the 2 million plus people across America who comprise the largest and most diversely talented and skilled workforce in our country. Under the Biden-Harris administration, OMB has made excellent strides in modernizing and revitalizing a federal government that was demoralized and gutted after 4 years of undermining and mismanagement. When he was in office, ex-President Trump used OMB not as the transmission belt for getting government services to the people, but as the instrument for personal vendettas against enemies in the public sector workforce as a whole. As Deputy Director Miller affirms in his testimony today, OMB is now using data and feedback from stakeholders across America to ensure that its guidance is always rooted in facts and the demands of pragmatic public policy, not ideological litmus tests and political loyalty tests. OMB's guidance and policies today are transforming how we interact with government. OMB is improving how our communities access federal funding, including grants and loans. It's ensuring that federal agencies use artificial intelligence equitably and ethically. OMB is setting excellent government-wide policies on recruiting and retaining a qualified federal workforce. Federal workers provide medical care to veterans, they respond to natural disasters, and they ensure the safety of the nation's food supply. They show up every day to provide essential services, and OMB is transforming the way the federal workforce thinks about serving the people and improving access to government programs and services. Here's a great example of the kind of innovation that's taking place. The IRS has launched the incredibly successful direct file pilot, which allows taxpayers in several states to easily and quickly file their taxes directly with the IRS at no cost. The trick is that the IRS guides you through filling out your Form 1040 with all of your basic W-2 information, which is the major or only income that most people have to report. Taxpayers with additional questions about direct file access customer service representatives directly for help. But in other words, the government comes to act as your tax preparer. People should not have to pay exorbitant fees to private companies for help filing a straightforward tax return. OMB is leading other similar government-wide efforts to reduce the cost and frustration of interacting with government. I look forward to the day, soon I hope, when we will have direct file for the whole country and people will be able to open up a note from the IRS with their tax forms pre-populated. That's information that the government has. Another critical way that individuals, businesses, and communities interact with government is through the federal grants process. In fiscal year 2024 thus far, for example, state and local government entities, nonprofits, and local businesses in Texas, for example, received more than $29 billion in grants just from the Department of Health and Human Services. Despite all these investments, the reporting requirements and the complicated process required to secure federal funding have slowed down access and innovation and kept many communities from getting critical funding. But OMB's updated guidance puts grant applicants, the people who are elected, who we are elected to serve, in the driver's seat and adapts the capabilities of today's technology to modern-day constituent expectations. When OMB announced this new guidance last month, the chief of the Division of Fiscal Management for Montgomery County, Maryland, which I represent, spoke at the event and said, quote, "Plain language, accessible information, and reduction in burdensome closeout requirements allows for those of us in local government to have broader and clearer conversations on grant implementation through our organizations." As I'm sure the distinguished chairman can confirm, residents from Kentucky have also appreciated and lauded this new guidance, along with my constituents in Maryland. In the comment process for this new guidance, I noticed a consultant from Fort Knox who helps museums, zoos, parks, and other cultural centers, who commented that the new guidance would reduce the burdens placed on nonprofits, allowing them to devote energies more toward doing the work that directly fulfills their missions. The National Council of Nonprofits said that OMB's new guidance is welcomed by the nonprofit community, particularly the improvements that reduce administrative burdens and require agencies to use plain language. Other nonprofit groups welcomed OMB's updated guidance as well. I look forward to hearing more today about how OMB has modernized and updated its grants guidance to simplify the process for all of the communities and constituents that we serve. I also look forward to hearing from Deputy Director Miller about how we can work together to make federal programs even more effective by preventing fraud and waste in federal spending. Earlier this month, I was proud to introduce the Government Spending Oversight Act of 2024, which would make more permanent the Inspector General community's ability to identify and to ferret out fraud in federal programs. Also, very importantly, I want to highlight the vital role that a nonpartisan, merit-based federal workforce plays for our country. The rejected Schedule F proposal would remove experts and replace them with an army of sycophants, and that proposal would disproportionately affect OMB's workforce. Under the ex-president's plan, nearly 70% of our non-political workforce could have been fired simply because they did their jobs and followed their oath to defend the Constitution. Although President Biden has taken steps to prevent a future similar attack on our civil service, we cannot forget that an expert and nonpartisan federal workforce is essential to a functioning democratic government. With that, I look forward to hearing testimony this morning from Deputy Director Miller. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Member.